Hello, welcome back. We are doing our Python course, and today we are going to talk about how to do a bit of text mining, which means to take a text file and to try to see some properties of it, the number of words, or perhaps later to analyze particular sentiments in the file to see if it's positive or negative. So let's go and do that. In the last session, we talked about how to upload a file. You saw how to call files upload, which is what you see here now in the background. Just very briefly, you have to use the Google Colab files library in order to do this, the module, and then you call files upload, and from this you get back a dictionary which tells you the file name. You open the file name, get a file handle back, and this file handle now you can treat like a file, like the file itself, and you can use it to read the lines out of the file, and this is what we did here. So if you have any problems with this, go back to the previous video and have a look. Now we want to do a little bit of what is called text mining. Sounds like a very professional thing. In principle, this only means we do some analysis on the text. And this is very useful for the humanities. It can mean to find common words in a play, for example, or to see the sentiment of newspaper articles. So you would have a newspaper article from, let's say, the 50s, and then another from the 60s, and then another from the 70s, or perhaps 10 from each period. And then you want to see how did the sentiment of these articles change over time. Were the 50s a more optimistic time than the 70s, for example? And you could do this by doing exactly that. Do some text mining, open the files, read them, do some statistics on words, try to find positive words versus negative words, optimistic words versus pessimistic words, and then you can see how things developed over time. Or you can find stylistic differences between authors. Another thing you would do in the humanities, you want to see, did Shakespeare actually write this play? And so you make an analysis of the statistical properties of plays you know are from Shakespeare, and then you would afterwards look at the play that you don't know, you're not sure about, and compare the occurrence of particular words that are Shakespeare specific, right, in this new play, and see if it also looks statistically like it is from the same author. So text mining, although it's a very simple thing, the way we do it can still be very useful. And you can track characters in a play, when they appear, when they disappear, how many lines they have. So all these are interesting applications. And now the first thing we want to do, perhaps, count word frequencies. We will need a text file for that. I have done this already. So what you could do is to just copy this or whatever, piece of text, put it in your clipboard, and then open a text file on your desktop and copy this into the file. So just make sure you have a text file somewhere. It's important, though, that this is a real text file, not a Word file, because, as you perhaps know, a Word file is not a text file. It contains all sorts of formatting, at least potentially. Even if you don't use any formatting, Word will still save it in its own format, this doc or docx format. And this is not text, so this you cannot read with your program. You need something that is actually text. So an HTML page, for example, would work. This is text mostly, except for the tags in there. But the best thing to do is to just, here, copy this, go to your desktop and create a new file. And then you will see the option. If you right click on the desktop, you will see the option text file. And then you can create a new text file. So whatever you do, create a text file, and then we will start working with it. So now if you look at this, we first again import files, then we import the string module. String is useful because it has various functions that have to do with string processing, which is what we are doing. We read the file as strings, as a sequence of strings or a list of strings, and then we want to do some statistics. We want to search for words in the string and so on. And for these kinds of things, string has some useful functions. The first thing we do, we upload the text we want to analyze, or the user has to upload it. And this is the usual way. I explained it in the last video, how you get a file to Google Colab, because you have to upload it to Google servers first. So you upload it, you get the file name back, and then you say analyzing file name, just to let the user know what's happening. Now we have to read the file, open file name in the mode R, which means reading as file, and file here now is our file handle. So if any of these things are not clear to you, or you find them problematic, or you have not understood them fully, please go back. The previous video explains all this in detail. And now we have the full text of the file, which we read with file.read. So this is one string, and reads the whole file into one string. So we have one long string that contains all the line breaks. So it's a string that goes over multiple lines, as many lines as your file has, and the whole text is in this variable full text. And now we start working with that. So the first thing, if we want to analyze frequencies of words, is probably to convert the whole string to lowercase. We would do this because originally we have, capitalized letters, and we have small letters. After every period you have a capital word. So we don't want this, because when you count frequencies, you want the capital letters to count the same as the small letters. You don't want to have car in big letters and car in small letters and count them separately, right? Because it's both times the same word. So what we do first is to convert the whole content of the file, which we read into this one string, into lowercase, and this is what this line does. Full text dot lower. You remember we talked about this before, this lower, when we were talking about methods of string objects. And you saw then we discussed upper and lower and so on. So lower is a method that converts the string to lowercase. And the next thing we want to do is to remove punctuation from our file, because now you have all these commas and periods and so on stuck in there, and they would count as parts of words. So when you have so, comma, it would count like a different word than so without the comma. So in some way, we have to remove this punctuation. We have to get rid of it. And this is very easy. This is why we have these string methods of the object string. String objects have lots of interesting methods. And you see here, what we do is to assign to lower text, again, lower text with a punctuation replaced. And how does this work is that we first need to have a list of punctuation. And this is what string.punctuation gives us. Okay, to show you what punctuation is, let me first create a new code cell here. You would normally create a scratch code cell. It's just because of the way I've arranged the windows now. The scratch code cell would appear on the top right, somewhere far away from where we have our screen recording now. This is why I create a regular code cell, and I will paste the string punctuation in there. And for this to work, we also need to import string again. So let's import string and then print string punctuation. And you see what this is. This is a long string that contains all the punctuation marks that Python considers punctuation. Of course, you can disagree depending on what language you speak or your requirements. You might add different punctuation. For example, you see that this has only the ASCII characters, so only a normal dash. If you're using something like an M dash, or typographically, other quotes, those curly quotes, for example, are also not here, then you would need to add them to this, or treat them separately. But for the basic requirements, this is good enough. So for punc in string punctuation, so this will now give you one by one the punc, which is one character from this punctuation string. You remember, if I go with 4 through a string, I get it character by character. And then my lower text is the previous lower text. Replace the each punctuation character by an empty string. And so in this way, I delete all the punctuation. Now, again, you could start discussing now whether you want to replace it by an empty string or by a space, because it depends on how the text is written. If it's written, according to standard, it would be always a space after punctuation anyway. So you have one word, comma, space, another word. But some people don't do this. They just write one word, comma, second word without a space. If you have done this in your text, or if somebody has written like this in your text, then this would be wrong what happens now, because when you replace the comma by an empty string, you would stick the two words together rather than having them as separate words. So you have to be a little careful here what your text looks like. If you have text you don't know, you could first check, is there a space after the comma? If so, then I remove it. Or you always insert a space and then you remove all the double spaces. So there are various ways of doing it. Anyway, in this case, we opt for a simple method. We'll just replace all the punctuation with nothing. And now we have to split the single string into a list of words, and this happens here, all words, lower text, dot, split. And what split does is to create a list of words. Again, I can show you this. Okay, so let us do this. Let us try it out so far so you can see what happens here with the words. We just copy the whole thing. Make sure you copy also the import statements, otherwise you don't have them. I make a new code cell and copy my code into there, and then I execute it. And after a moment, it will show me down here, upload the text you want to analyze. I click on browse, and now I can choose a new text document. And now I have this document here. My program doesn't yet analyze anything, doesn't print anything, but it has created the all words. And so now after this has happened, I can print all words just to show you what this would look like. So that we don't have to upload the whole thing again, let's comment the section out that is uploading. We don't need to upload anything anymore because we now have already done this. And as you remember, Google Colab is going to remember our variables for the duration of the session, so I don't have to do this again. So I can just execute it again now and print all words, and you see what happens. Explains how water felt and so on. So it splits my text into words, and this has worked nicely. So now I have all my words. Now I want to count the words. So what I do next is to create a dictionary, an empty dictionary with the word count. So there's nothing in there, but I need to create it so that I can add things to it later. And now for word in all words. So this will go through all words, and you can see if I hover over it with my mouse, I get told what there is in there, right? 78 items, explains how, water, and so on. And now for every word, we want to get the count of this word. So we use word counts, which is my empty dictionary. And from this, we get the current word, which is word, or 0. So get is a way to safely index the dictionary. If the thing does not exist, the word does not exist, I get 0 back. If the word exists, I get the number that there is in the dictionary for this word. If you're not sure about that, go back. There's a whole video about how get works. And now we have the current count for this word. And now I put it into my dictionary, word counts at the position word. Word is the index into the dictionary, the key, and the value is current count plus 1. So why is it plus 1? Because we begin with 0 and we now have found our first word, so we make it plus 1. We increase it, right? the current count plus 1. Okay, so here we are, and then we print the word frequency results, and we get it by iterating over the whole word counts items, all items in this dictionary, and for each one we get the word and the count, we get the key and the value, and print them. So let us try this. We execute it. We have to browse again, find our text file, upload the text file, then it's analyzed, and then it gives us the statistics for the words. And you see here, for example, with the curly quotes, we have this problem. I mentioned that we have not removed them, so we would need to do this here also, right? The list is unsorted, as you see. There is some way also to sort it, but I think we should not bother with this right now because it's a little more complicated. So this was it. We saw how to open a file, how to do some basic text mining, and I hope that this was useful, and see you next time.